a weekend coming up, but it has been a while since we've talked, so I figured I'd hop on. Hey everybody, how's it going? I just decided today, that I was going to add the NYSYLC fundraiser. And for those of you who don't know, NYSYLC, we're in a really tough moment right now. As we know, a record number of us are unemployed, and we need another stimulus check, employed or unemployed, no matter your status. Everyone needs another stimulus check. Unemployment benefits are expiring this week, which is a huge issue that we need to make sure that we take care of. But despite all of that, this entire time, the families that have been feeding us, so many of the families that have been feeding us, that have been responsible for frontline essential work, haven't even gotten stimulus checks and haven't even gotten, they haven't even received extended unemployment because they are undocumented. And what NYSYLC is doing is that they are fundraising for an emergency fund to help some of our undocumented brothers and sisters out, because one of the big issues that we have in our country is that the amount of racism. Oh, I have ice cream, by the way, but the amount, with the amount of xenophobia that we're seeing, especially this administration, there's so much language that's disrespecting undocumented people, when the fact of the matter is, they're the ones these are the families and the individuals that are making sure that we're fed. They're often taking care of our children. They are often making sure that our workplaces and our homes are sanitary. And so we cannot go on with kind of these xenophobic narratives that undocumented people are somehow wrong or just bad human beings, when the fact of the matter is that the scaffolding of American life is so much of the scaffolding of American life is built upon the labor of undocumented people and the fact that they are underpaid and that they are underrecognized, and it's wrong. And so, when we talk about stimulus checks and unemployment, we are more than happy to benefit from the employment of undocumented people until it's, and by the way, who pay taxes, who have paid duly and contributed to society, until it's time to take care of each other. And so, anyways, all of that is to say, that's why I chose NYSYLC. No pressure to donate, but if you find it in your heart and you're able to, just pop it in right there. This is just so incredible. You all are amazing. I haven't even been on this live for long at all, and we're almost about to raise $10,000 for these families. You all are totally incredible. I'm shocked. I'm absolutely shocked. So thank you all so much. And also, I'm kind of sorry to NYSYLC because I didn't tell them ahead of time that I was doing this. I just pulled up the fundraisers button and I looked through all these amazing organizations, and I was like, who's doing amazing work? NYSYLC is doing amazing work, and they aren't being recognized enough for it. So I just popped on that button, and you all just are blasting through with $12,000 in donations. And all of this money is going to go straight into the pockets of undocumented people who have not received a stimulus check, who have not gotten, the money that any relief at all. So anyways, let's hop to it. I'm here to answer your questions tonight. Hopefully my ice cream will not melt, but it probably will. I'm having a black raspberry chocolate chip ice cream, which I usually eat out of the pint, but I try not to do brands and stuff like that. I just want you all to know I'm keeping it real. So anyways, let's make sure that we answer some of your questions. Feel free to either type them right here into the chat or submit them in the little question box that's kind of right here in the bottom. So, hey everyone, I see there's incredible folks joining us here in the chat. We've got the Khalif Browder Foundation. For those of you who do not know, the Khalif Browder Foundation is another incredible organization founded after the death of Khalif Browder, who was unjustly incarcerated and kept in Rikers Island as a teenager after being accused of stealing a backpack. And it just goes to show how deeply broken our carceral system is, from people being detained on cash bail before they've ever been, convicted of even a crime, all the way over to for-profit immigration detention, all forms of caging people. And so, anyways, we're all here. Holy smokes, y'all are blowing past 20 grand. This is wild. Anyways, let's hop straight to the questions. So, this is because we are in like a really tough, we're in a really tough time for all of you. For those of you who do not know, John Lewis is being laid to rest in the Capitol, which is just, this is one of the few times in American history where something like this happens, and especially for someone who was not a president to be laid in state in the Capitol, is just such a profound testament to the mark that John Lewis left in our history and in our soul as a country. And, I have to say that there are a lot of folks that are, on one day claiming to eulogize Mr. Lewis, but at the other hand, they are also trying to undo the legacy of voting rights and to prevent justice for Black communities as well. And you can't do one and the other at the same time. It's hypocritical. And if we really want to honor the legacy of just one of the greatest Americans who have ever lived, we need to protect the Voting Rights Act. We need to make sure that we are passing the Justice and Policing Act at a bare minimum. And really, we need to make sure that we are honoring these heroes and a hero like John Lewis with our actions, not just with our words. And we have to be there to back it up. So let's run straight into the questions. I'm going to hop in. And I'm just going to see what's going on here. Someone said, it says I can't receive. Okay, it says I can receive questions, but I can't show them on the screen. Okay, so I'll just browse through some of them. Someone's asking me, what do I think about schools reopening in the fall? Listen, here's what I think. I think that, when we talk about schools reopening or this reopening or that reopening, this is not a question of my opinion. This is not supposed to be a question of political opinion. This should be a question of scientific fact and what is informed by science and public health professionals. And right now, I would say that an enormous amount of the cities that have been afflicted by one outbreak or another are not prepared to reopen schools. And I think that one of the issues that we're seeing here is that there's a ton of pressure to reopen schools because we have made it economically impossible for parents to do their job and to also do their second job, which is raising their children and also making sure that their kids are able to go to school. And because we have made a situation that is so economically impossible for parents, that's creating this secondary political pressure to say, we can't do this at home, we need to reopen schools. Except the problem with that is that if your city did not respond adequately to the outbreak, if your state has not responded adequately to the outbreak, oh, and by the way, if our federal government has not responded adequately to the outbreak, which it has not, then we cannot reopen schools in that situation. And so, you know, that is really the problem that we are in. So this is not just a public health issue, but this is also a labor issue too, because we are asking school workers, we're asking teachers, we're asking folks. Oh, look, there's NYSYLC right there saying thanks. Thank you all for the work that you do. It's incredible. Anyways, so we cannot expect and say, you can be in danger, I will endanger your life, I will endanger your life. What we need to do is come together, not make this about parents versus teachers or schools versus communities. But first of all, we need to make sure that everyone gets another stimulus check. And we need to make sure that unemployment benefits can be preserved so that they don't expire this week, so that people are able to manage this transition first and foremost, in the way that they can best smoothly navigate this situation. But also, I think we just really need to make sure that that it is safe in a given community, because as we're seeing right now, it's like, do you all know that SpongeBob meme where it's like Squidward on the window and SpongeBob and Patrick are like running out and he's watching them play? That's the United States watching all the other countries reopen right now, because they all listened to the science. They all froze mortgages and rent. They all paid people to be in a situation where they could quarantine safely, make sure that the virus got contained, and then reopen slowly with fully funded test and trace programs. So now everyone else is able to start, living their lives again. But because we can't get it together, and frankly, more people are willing to believe in lizard people than believe that masks are actually informed by science, then we're having this problem, because we're having a Republican Party that has been overrun with conspiracy theories, and it continues to set us back, because nobody wants to be shut down, right? Nobody wants to be in this situation. It gives me no pleasure to stay inside and not be able to see my family, see my friends, and all of that. But the whole goal is that, first of all, when you ignore the science, you create a situation where the only way to contain the virus is full shutdown. And getting to a point of full shutdown is a failure point. Full shutdown is like when you're on the subway and you need to pull the emergency lever. That's what a full shutdown is. And the reason we have to pull that emergency lever is because we didn't test and trace early enough. We didn't shut down certain segments early enough. And we didn't enact certain policies. And that created a situation where the spread got out of control. And now, once it gets beyond to a test and tracing capacity, then you have to shut down. So when it comes to schools, first of all, the one thing that I want to say is that it's a very politically popular point to rally behind our teachers, right? It's always politically, we need to pay our teachers more. We need to respect teachers. Everyone wants to respect teachers around election time. But now when it's time to reopen schools, people aren't respecting the lives and the safety of teachers that they are asking to send in and be exposed to so many people. We all know that kids are not going to be able to keep their masks on all day. Anyone who's taking care of children, they're going to be wiping their nose. They're going to be doing all of these things. The other point that I hear as well, and this is a thread that I had picked up from a teacher, that's such an excellent point where, there's a lot of parents that are concerned about the socio-emotional development of their kids. And, we're all super concerned about how our children are going to be processing this moment, and it is really difficult. This is an unprecedented time. No one's really had to go through this. But also, there's the flip side, which is if you send your children to school, so much of a teacher's job, especially at younger ages, is socio-emotional. So imagine sending your child into an emotionally vulnerable situation, whether they have an altercation that day or whether it's their first time going to school and they're really having a tough time adjusting to being in school for the first time, and your teacher can't hug them. Your teacher's not allowed to really give them the support and care that they need, and they have to kind of console a child from 6 feet away as much as they can. It's not a tenable situation. And so where there are communities where the virus is contained, and when the virus starts to get under control with robust contact tracing, then I think it's okay for us to fully reopen schools. But it's a really, really tough call. And to all of our parents out there, to all of our teachers out there, to all of our communities out there that have to struggle with these decisions, just know that my heart goes out to you. And the reason these decisions are so hard is because the federal government, and by the federal government, I mean, I'm just going to narrow it down and say Republicans in the Senate and Donald Trump do not want to sustain the economic support that's necessary to make this a smooth transition. And so right now, that's one of the big reasons why I'm back in DC. We are voting on appropriations, but we're also hoping to get a second coronavirus bill together. And we hope, and what I'm fighting for is for another $1,200 check to come out. I'm fighting for the $600 unemployment benefit to continue and to be preserved. And we're also trying to make sure that we get student loan cancellation, rent and mortgage relief, and so much more. Now, here's the problem. We're saying, okay, we already gave folks another $1,200 stimulus check. Okay. And then we already gave people $600 in unemployment, additional unemployment expansion. And all we're asking Republicans to do is to preserve it. Just keep what you already agreed to. Just keep it. And Mitch McConnell's saying no. Donald Trump is saying no. Marco Rubio, where you at? Ted Cruz, where you at? Come on. Like, Susan Collins, where are you? You want to continue unemployment or not? Because these issues are not just, Mitch McConnell is the tip of the spear here, but this is every Republican senator that does not want to preserve unemployment insurance. Now, let's tackle some of the myths that Republicans are saying about this. Here's the one that I love the most, right? And by love, I mean abhor. Where they say, they act as though unemployment is some kind of incentive. And they say, listen, if we continue unemployment insurance, then people are going to stay on unemployment insurance. Let's talk about this. So first off, pause. The first thing is, if your unemployment insurance is paying you more than what your job was paying you, that is a problem with wages in America. That is not a problem of unemployment. If you were being paid less than a living wage, then that is a systemic problem, and we should be raising the minimum wage in the United States of America. So that's punto uno. Punto número dos. This idea that it's an incentive, if we get rid of unemployment, then everyone will go get a job. Where? Where are the 30 to 50 million jobs that these folks claim are just going to reappear overnight? Like, can someone point them out to me? Because last I knew and last I saw, we're in the middle of a global pandemic that put 30 to 50 million Americans, depending on, when you include the informal economy and formal economy, bare minimum 30 million Americans lost their job almost overnight. And jobs are not just like a light switch where they turn off and then you take unemployment away and you just turn on and created 30 million jobs. If that was the case, don't you think people would have done it already? Don't you think that would have happened? But it didn't. Those jobs right now are gone. And it is going to take time to build ourselves back. And flipping people and pushing them off the edge into eviction, into medical debt, into defaulting on your student loans, into defaulting on credit cards, whatever it is, none of that is going to solve the problem. In fact, it will make things worse. And so what we are essentially debating right now with Republicans is whether we're going to have a Great Depression or not. And they're acting as though, and when we say, hey, do you want to have a Great Depression? Do you want to put people, millions or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands potentially of people on the brink of eviction? Are we going to do that? And you know what Republicans are going? I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? What do you mean we don't know? We need to keep people in their homes. We need to make sure that people are able to feed their kids. And by the way, we should build back better and stronger and more resilient systems than we had before. We should not build back to what we have. Why on earth would anyone want to go back to the broken, janky medical system of health insurance that we have had for profit in the United States of America after this? This should be a lesson, and we can build back better. Why don't we just, y'all, I'm catching myself on a wave, because the thing that I don't understand too, and this is not just a question, now what I'm about to get to with health insurance, this is not just a question I have for Republicans, this is a question that I also have for Democrats too. I'm not going to pretend that this is some one-party problem issue, right? Right now, most of the problems are coming from one party, and that is the Republican Party. But can some Democrat who believes in our for-profit collection of corporate health insurance please explain to me why we can't just open, or why we should not work to open Medicare to every single person who just lost their job? Because right now the solution is to subsidize COBRA, which, do you like COBRA? Drop a comment if you like COBRA. Drop a comment if you even know what COBRA is. Because if you don't know what COBRA is, or if you don't like it, then that means it's probably not giving you adequate health insurance. And so, who cares? We should expand Medicare and work to open the doors of Medicare. Because here's the issue with Medicaid. Now, here's some good things with Medicaid. Medicaid, a lot of folks would say that Medicaid can be more efficient and more cost efficient in delivering healthcare. And I think it's worth taking a look at why that is. And I think it's worth taking a look at some of those systems. Look at all these people. Everyone says no one likes COBRA. No one likes COBRA. We should not defend it. I don't think that Democrats should make their brand and say, hey, you know what's great? COBRA. No, it's not. No, it's not great. COBRA shouldn't even exist. It should not even exist. We should have systems that are able to guarantee people health care without making them go broke. And apparently in America, that makes you the most radical, far left, angry person in the world for thinking that people should be guaranteed health care without going broke. But anyways, I digress. COBRA's ridiculously expensive. It is, I just don't even know how a person can offer COBRA and just stand there with a serious face and say COBRA is a solution for working families. It's crazy. If you can afford COBRA, then your life's pretty good, actually, if you can afford it. It's so expensive. And if you can barely afford COBRA right now, even if you're able to swing COBRA, it leaves you broke at the end of the day too. And how else are you going to pay for childcare, rent, everything else? It's wild. So, look, there are folks popping in here right here in the comments saying COBRA cost me almost as much as my rent. I mean, it's not just COBRA. When we think about some of the costs that make people, that almost rival people's rent, it's like, I mean, it's really criminal. It's amoral. There are people I know whose student loan payment is almost as high as their rent. Raise your hand if your student loan payment is almost as high as your rent. Raise your hand if your health insurance is almost as high as your rent. Raise your hand if you have medical payments, insurance or medical debt of any kind that's almost as much as your rent. And it's just, I cannot tell you how often, I know people for whom this is the situation, and B, my friends are in this situation. C, I've been in situations that are similar to that. It's not wrong. I mean, it's wrong. It is wrong, and it's not right. And so we really need to make sure that we're taking care of people right now. It's a pandemic. This is about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? You need to cover the basics before you can get to making sure that we're having a super well-functioning, high-functioning society. And that means food, that means rent, that means it means food, it means shelter, it means basic health. And right now, all of those things are in a precarious position for a lot of people, which is why the Senate needs to get it together, and they need to extend the pandemic unemployment assistance. They need to send out another stimulus check, and we need to include automatic stabilizers. But they're trying to play games because they think that if you can stick your fingers in your ears, that it's going to somehow change the reality. It's not. The reality is that over 30 million Americans are unemployed. And the reality is that we have not seen this level of unemployment shock in the United States of America since the Great Depression. And the reality is that it is going to take heroic federal policy not seen in at least 100 years to make sure that people are okay and that we can get out of this mess. And if, my opinion on this is that if any policy that's being presented looks anything remotely similar to anything that we've done before, we're not doing enough. We're not doing enough. This is not like 2008. This is not like the Great Recession, where unemployment started to kind of, first of all, we've well blown past those numbers. But second of all, where unemployment started to just like kind of creep up, this is completely in a different universe. We're talking about in 2 months, 30 million people becoming unemployed. And I don't think that a lot of my colleagues really understand what that means to be a normal person. And they're not acting with any urgency. They're just kind of like whistling and walking by and checking on, their stocks. And that's not the position that we're in as everyday people. So anyways, I'll move on. Checking in here, I cannot believe you all have raised $43,000 for the NYSYLC. You all are incredible. For those who are just tuning in, this is a fund that's going to people, hardworking people in our country that did not get stimulus checks, that are not getting unemployment, but who are feeding us, who are delivering us food, preparing our food, cleaning and sanitizing our workplaces. So many undocumented people are helping us sustain our lives and have helped us sustain our lives, and are paying taxes and aren't even getting a dime of relief. And these are the folks that are suffering, in some ways the most. And so, I just want to thank you all for supporting the NYSYLC. because we're fighting to pass federal policy, but so much of our federal policy leaves people behind. And I'm just so thankful that you all are stepping up for so many of the people that are being left behind right now. So I'm ready to pop in. Let's see if you guys have any other additional questions. Someone said, "Is your ice cream melting?" Yes, my ice cream is absolutely melting. It is now soup. It's my dessert gazpacho at this point. Let's see. Someone is saying, "What is happening with the feds in Portland?" Let's talk about Portland.
Uh-oh.
What we are seeing, what we've seen in Portland, is just an incredibly scary manifestation of something that so many of us have been warning about for a really, really long time. Now, a year ago, I voted against funding DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, which is the overarching agency responsible for CBP and ICE. Now, what does CBP and ICE have to do with arresting U.S. citizens? That's an excellent question, because what we have done is that we have put in billions and billions and billions of dollars into a poorly regulated agency that is rogue, that has almost zero accountability, that has almost no rules, and by the way, was created in about 2002, 2003-ish. So this isn't an agency that has an established history, and this is an agency that repeatedly breaks the law and is not held accountable for it. And the issue that we have with the Department of Homeland Security is that, and these are issues, and you know what's really sad about this is that back in the day, there were Republicans that opposed the establishment of the Department of Homeland Security, and they came from a libertarian perspective, because back then, Republicans who claimed to be libertarians actually had integrity, and they said this is an expansion of government power, this infringes upon our civil liberties, we're allowing things in the Patriot Act like warrantless wiretapping, this is not, we have these secret courts with the FISA courts. All of this is wrong. And so there were principled people, even the Republican Party, that says the Department of Homeland Security should not exist. This was a libertarian right position, and it was also a position from some people on the left as well, progressives on the left, for very similar reasons. Because when it comes to the protection of civil liberties, there are actually some pockets of the right and some pockets of the left that used to be able to come together. Now the right wing has just, the Republican Party has kind of become a cult of personality around Donald Trump. And there are very few Republicans that will openly oppose him. And so how does this tie to Portland? The reason this ties to Portland is because, as many people know, several weeks ago, there were protesters that were just getting kind of disappeared by secret police, unmarked officers. And why is this so scary? Well, it's incredibly scary because, first of all, if you are taken into an unmarked van and you don't know what agency is responsible for taking your brother, your mother, your friend, how are you supposed to be able to find them? In the United States, we have habeas corpus, and when you are detained, that means within 24 hours, you need to be told why you're being detained, what your charges are, or you need to be let go. And when people are detained for longer than that, and you don't know where this person was taken to, when we have a history of having, these kind of extrajudicial pockets in this country, that's extraordinarily scary for our civil liberties. And when we talk about this concept of American exceptionalism, when people say America's the greatest, America's the best country on earth, when we say those things, the reason why people have historically said that is because of our constitutional liberties. When they say we have freedom. And what does freedom mean? Freedom doesn't mean you have the freedom to walk into Trader Joe's and abuse a worker because you don't want to wear a mask. That's not what freedom means. What freedom means is that you have the freedom of speech. You have the freedom to not be denied due process. That means you have the freedom to do what you can and not be detained by your state or your government unjustly. And people have died and shed blood for those rights and those liberties, not just here in the United States, but everywhere in the world. And so when a person is disappeared into a van by an unmarked officer who will not disclose their name, who will not disclose what agency they work with, and by the way, has no business detaining US citizens, we are in really big trouble. And this is where we start talking about authoritarian regimes and fascism. Because it's one thing for your rights to be written down on a sacred piece of paper like the Constitution. What makes it special here in this country is that we actually enforce those rights and that we protect people's rights. And once we stop enforcing people's constitutional rights and liberties, actual Constitution, like you actually open the Constitution and read it, because the Constitution does not say I should go to Costco and not wear a mask. That's not in the Constitution, okay? But what is in your Constitution is your ability to not be detained by the state, that you are free from illegal search and seizure, and many more. And so what is scary about Portland is that when DHS and last year CBP, a year ago, I was saying that CBP and ICE should not be getting these funds. Congress started cutting multi-billion-dollar checks to ICE and CBP after, by the way, after they separated children from their parents and caged these kids and deported their parents. Even after that, we said, listen, we need to draw a line in the sand. They cannot be getting these blank checks. There needs to be accountability. And by the way, ICE as an agency, as it's structured, should not exist. DHS as an agency, the way it is currently organized, someone tell me why it makes sense, why FEMA and CBP and ICE and the Coast Guard should all be part of the same agency. It doesn't make sense. And in fact, it's incredibly dangerous when it's structured that way. And so what's happening is that billions and billions of dollars have gone to ICE and CBP. And as we're talking about police uprisings in this country, I think it's really important that people understand. Do you know what is now the largest law enforcement organization in the United States of America? It's CBP. It's Customs and Border Patrol. It's the largest law enforcement agency in the country. And they are not accountable. They don't even have the same accountability as normal police officers. Your average police department has more accountability than CBP does. Think about that, because all of these uprisings that we're having across the country are about the lack of accountability in many police departments. And so think about that, and think about the fact that your average police department has more the few structures of accountability that people are saying aren't enough. That is leagues more accountability than even CBP has. And so now CBP, which is a rogue agency, which has kidnapped children from their parents, when the moment we said we could do that to others, we set the stage for doing that to ourselves. Because that's how just values and principles work. And this administration has been using immigrants as a guinea pig for how much our civil liberties can be violated. And that is why it's so important that we stand up for each other. Because the moment you allow something like that to happen in the United States, you're just allowing it to happen. The moment you allow it to happen to any human being, is the moment you open the door for it to happen to someone you love, which is why I do not believe that this country is about some people that have rights and liberties and other people that do not have rights and liberties, i.e. documented, undocumented citizen, non-citizen. You cannot draw those lines. This is supposed to be, right, the language that is used is the land of the free, not some people who are free, not a land where some people are free. It is the land of the free. So if you are a human being on this land, you should be protected in your rights, in your liberties. And so when you disappear a person into an unmarked van, and you have people in CBP or DHS that feel deputized, they feel that they have the right to violate another human being's human rights and civil liberties, it is completely unacceptable. And so when we want to talk about what's going on in Portland, you are now having Customs and Border Patrol. They're not going after immigrants. They're going after U.S. citizens. That means they're opening the door to going after you, going after me, going after anybody else, because they don't have virtually any of the accountability that they should have. And so while people talk about this idea of abolish ICE and we need to restructure DHS, these are seen as these radical, far left, this, that, and whatever principles. Frankly, we're just talking about these concepts. But what's actually happening is far more radical and far more scary than any debate that's happening in Washington. Because what's actually happening is that people are getting snatched up by unmarked officers into a van. How is that not radical? And when we talk about, politics in Washington, because I want to discuss a little bit about the speech from last week as well, I also think that this is also part of a broader conversation about who gets deemed radical and who does not get deemed radical. Because you look at what the Trump administration is doing, you look at what Mitch McConnell is doing, you look at what a lot of these Republicans are doing, and they are never branded as radical. But isn't kidnapping children and trafficking them across the country and deporting their parents, isn't that radically violent and wrong? Isn't refusing economic protections for 30 million people radical? Isn't that a radical and severe thing to do? Isn't, when you look at, so many of these policies, but because they are wealthy, isn't a $2 trillion tax cut giveaway to the wealthiest people in society, to billionaires and the richest and wealthiest people, isn't that a radical misallocation of resources? It is. But the politicians who are very often wealthy, very often white, and very often male, though often you don't have to check all three of those boxes, but often do, they do radical things all the time, but they are not branded as radicals. Yet, women of color, and people who fight for the working class are always deemed radical. And I find this really interesting because it's really about otherizing people. When you call someone a radical, it's often done in a mainstream, when the mainstream calls people radical, it's often done with the purpose of otherizing. And that's when we start talking about dehumanizing language, right? Because even when I saw in some of the coverage to my speech, like people called me fiery and they called me emotional. And I don't know about y'all, but I didn't feel very fiery delivering that speech. I didn't feel like I was worked up or anything like that. And I do get fiery. Y'all know. But not here, not there. Yet people automatically jumped to this script of fiery, of basically she is asking for it, right? Like she came out here swinging all of these things when it simply wasn't even true. It wasn't even true. And so, when we talk about radical in a political context, in a mainstream political context, I'm not talking about the meaning of the word, because if you actually look at the meaning of the word, I don't mind being called a radical. I don't mind being radical when our problems are so radical. But in the way that that word is used and weaponized and selectively applied, it's done in a dehumanizing context. It's done in a way that's saying, these radicals, if you're radical, then you want to destroy or hurt people, and so we can do whatever we want to you. That's the subtext. That's the subtext in the way that it's used, because it's so selectively applied, and it's not evenly applied, and this happens all the time. It also happens in a very misogynistic way. When you consume the news, you will almost always see, especially with women, that a lot of news outlets deliberately select the most unattractive, unflattering. They'll take pictures of us kind of mid-sentence or mid-speaking, and they'll make that like the ugliest photo that you can find of a woman possible. When she's trying to make a point, they'll make that the header of a news article. And really it has implications for the point, right? But when it comes to men, I think it's hilarious the lengths that news media goes to find like the most gorgeous photo. Well, gorgeous, I don't know if I'd say gorgeous, but they'll find the most flattering photo ever of a man that's very often either being accused of sexual harassment or assault, or is proposing something very ugly. Like, look at it. You see the photos that the press use of someone like Newt Gingrich, and they're always photos from like 1999. Like, they're like Lindsey Graham. They're like pictures from years ago. Or they are pictures to make them look serious. And these are all kind of to make them look esteemed. And these are all the subtext. This all works in a subconscious level. And I noticed that, so a lot of the times it functions in a very subconscious way, but it very often bubbles to the top. When I was running in my primary election, where Wall Street and Goldman Sachs and all these big bank CEOs dumped $3 million against me. Oh, and then we wiped the floor with them because it's people, not big money, that should be dictating our democracy. Anyways, that's an aside. What did Goldman Sachs do? What did these Wall Street folks do? What did these dark money, big money funded organizations do? They sent out all of these mailers in this community, in my community, of me making these like terrible faces, right? Like they take pictures of me mid-speaking. They up the contrast. This also happens to candidates of color all the time, where they will manipulate your skin tone in Photoshop, which is so ugly and messed up, because you're playing into and you're stoking the fires of colorism. You're stoking the fires of racism. You're stoking the fires of misogyny, of xenophobia, because it's going to play into your hands. And but you know what? It happens all the time, and it's something that I think we can start to solve by being conscious of, and you have to call it out. And so whenever you see that, here's my little takeaway for today. Whenever you all see a news organization tweet a story about a female politician, and they use like an ugly photo, a lot of times they even contrast it. This even happened last week in my confrontation with Ted Yoho, where they'll use it, where a lot of organizations use articles where I'm scowling and he's smiling, when he was the assailant, when he was the one who was accosting somebody. So, so whenever you see that, call it out, and you should ask, why did you use those photos? Why did you use those photos in two different ways? And the more people start calling it out, the more these subconscious things start bubbling to the surface, and that's where how people can be held accountable. Because when we talk about these structures, as we know, it's all about these little, it's all of these little decisions that amount to then add up to real policy implications. Because what happens is that you discredit the messenger so that you can discredit the message, right? If you call the person, if someone's standing up and saying, listen, we need rent and mortgage relief right now, if you take the person that's standing up and you make an example of them and you call them radical and you make them look angry, then people say, oh, I don't know if I agree with her, or I don't know if I agree with that. And then what happens? You try to discredit the messenger so that you can discredit the message of guaranteeing health care, of raising the minimum wage to a living wage, so you can discredit rent and mortgage relief for everyday people. And then before you know it, you end up, we end up with just politics and politicians that aren't fighting for us. And so I just wanted to send that out there. I'll do one more question for you all. Feel free to pop the question here into the chat. And holy smokes, $57,000 for NYSYLC. You all are amazing. Again, there's never any pressure or anything to donate, but the fact that you all have, this is incredible. We are on the precipice right now. The unemployment pandemic, the pandemic unemployment assistance is expiring this week. We have to put the pressure on Republicans to expand it. And please do not take what they're trying to do right now is that they're trying to reduce it. So they know that there's going to be huge political consequences if they don't renew it at all. But now what they're trying to do is say, what if we send, now we're in the haggling phase, right? And so what they're trying to do is eliminate the expansion, and they're trying to give people less. We need to put pressure on Republicans right now to tell them to expand the $600 and to extend the $600 pandemic unemployment assistance, because they are trying to chop it. They're trying to get away with whatever they can get away with. If they can get away with getting rid of it entirely, they're going to do it. If they can get away with cutting it in half to make it $300, they're going to do it. So please don't let them do it. Light up the phones, light them up on Twitter, light them up everywhere, because we have to make sure that they extend unemployment assistance for everybody, especially, because some of y'all are in states that have horrible unemployment insurance policies. I know we have really big issues in New York, but relatively, New York's unemployment assistance is actually way higher than a lot of other states in the country. We're probably in like the top 3 or 4, which is sad that we're in the top 3 or 4, because we should be doing so much more. But there's states in Florida, there are other states that give like $200-300 a week that people can't live on. And so this $600 it makes, it's the difference between people being able to feed themselves and not feed themselves. So do I think we're going to get another stimulus check? I think that right now, and again, all of this negotiation is up in the air right now. So they're arguing about this in the Capitol as we speak, and as we negotiate. So all of this with a big disclaimer that none of this is guaranteed. I'm just reading the tea leaves for you all. Here's what I think. I think that right now, today, just in how the discourse is, I think things are looking good for a second stimulus check. but it's not by any means guaranteed. I think it's looking okay. But there are all of these other chips that they're trying to use, right? So they're trying to pit all of these benefits that we've already given people and that we've already agreed to. We've already agreed to extend to the $600 unemployment, right? We've already sent out one stimulus check, right? Now what they're trying to do is pit these two things up against each other. What Republicans are trying to do is pit these things against each other. And so what it seems like the negotiation is right now is that Republicans are saying, okay, we will send you another stimulus check, but we're going to cut the unemployment assistance. That's not very helpful, right? And also, $600 when you get that check multiple times adds up to more than $1,200, which is why they're trying to dangle this stimulus check, because they want to make sure that we cut that big number too. So that's kind of the thing. That's where things are at right now. I believe that we should be doing both. I think we need to send out a second stimulus check, and we need to make sure that that unemployment continues for every person that needs it. And as small businesses slowly start to open up, if we're able, God willing, if we're able to get on track with being safe and mask wearing and all of this stuff, then we can start implementing. I'm supportive of a transition back to work that allows the federal government to pick up the tab if you're making more money on unemployment. I think we should raise the minimum wage, and I think that the federal government should step in to help small businesses maintain that level of income. So if in the short run, if you're a small business owner and making that leap in wages is going to be really tough for you in reopening, I do think that we can work it out. Pramila Jayapal has the Paycheck Guarantee Act, which works to do that. So it's not just about this binary of unemployment and employment, but that people are able to make what they need to live, and they don't have to choose between those two things. And so there's solutions out there. The question is, do people want to try? And right now we don't have enough people that are willing to try. So that's the big thing. So right now, I do think that there's going to be assistance of some kind that is going to be kind of re-upped by the federal government. But I am asking you, if you have a state that is represented by a Republican, or if you are represented by a Republican in any way, shape, or form, now is the time to put on pressure. Don't put on pressure 3 weeks from now when they pass some terrible bill and it's too late because it's already done. You need to be lighting up the phones right now while they're having this negotiation, because they need to feel the heat. And November's coming, and they need to know that if they do not extend and take care of people, they're going to lose their jobs. Frankly, I hope they lose their jobs anyway, because they've messed up this pandemic, but they should feel the heat. And so, oh my goodness, we got to $60,000. You all are incredible. Thank you so much. You are helping so many immigrant families that did not get a stimulus check, that did not get unemployment expansion, but are feeding people and have been dedicated to their communities in so many different ways. You all are incredible. Don't worry. Again, I'm sorry. I was representing the most COVID impacted district in the United States of America. Our little pocket of the Bronx and Queens was the hardest hit by coronavirus in the country at the peak in New York. We had the uprisings. I was out there getting masks and hand sanitizer to people protesting in the streets to make sure that they were being safe. We were trying to make sure that we were legislating, that we were conducting oversight. So I got a little bit busy. Oh, and by the way, I had a primary election on top of that. So I got a little busy. I fell off the IG Live train, but I'm hoping to get back on hopefully next time I'll be cooking, because I know you all really like when I cook while I'm doing these things. So I'm gonna try to get my recipe for next time. But thank you all so much. Thank you for raising all of this money for immigrant families. You all are absolutely incredible. And I think just tonight, just hopping on live, having a conversation, raising tens of thousands of dollars for families in need, you all show that we can take care of each other. And you all show that it's not a pipe dream. And each and every single day, you all prove that these things that we're constantly told and gaslit are unrealistic and unfeasible and not possible are just wrong. You're a living defiance of that, and you are living proof that we can have a society that is compassionate, that takes care of each other, and guarantees basic human, civil, and economic rights. So thank you all so much. We'll see ya.